Unlock the
Are there any
truth.
trends in cybersecurity right now that
Cybersecurity's
people should
hidden
know about?
risks and essentials you can't
I
afford
think
to
one of the biggest ones
ignore.
that we see quite often is the social engineering and catfishing. So a lot of people nowadays are on dating apps, for example. A lot of people are on social media, and what we see quite a lot of is, there'll be somebody on there, and then somebody of the opposite gender, reaches out to them and says, "Hey, starts kind of romancing them and things like that." Then they'll start mentioning, "Hey, I also invest in this company here. Here if you put in a few $100 in this company, it could be good for you." And they try to get people tricked through social engineering and especially romance.
And I suppose that happens, right? And if they know it's a hack, or they report to the FBI, the local law enforcement. Who do they report that to?
So interestingly, it's definitely the FBI, the local law enforcement. You want to file those reports, but one that a lot of people don't think about is actually the Secret Service. Is another place to report
Yeah, I would never get
cryptocurrency.
Secret Service.
Yeah, they have a division for this. So at the end of the day, though, especially with the methods that these attackers use, typically, and in fact, most of the time nowadays, they're using cryptocurrency as the means of stealing money. And the nature of cryptocurrency is once you make a transaction happen, there's no way to reverse it. So, law enforcement at that point, they can't really do very much to recover your money. A lot of times these criminals are in other parts of the world that don't have the same laws, and they're using VPNs, as you mentioned, and other methods of hiding their tracks. So it's kind of a lost cause most of the time.
Is there a stat out there somewhere that shows like what percentage of us have been hacked?
That's an interesting question. I don't know.
Okay. Any idea like what percentage of hackers are successful as far as getting money from people?
So I could say that it's a very low percentage of overall hacks that are successful. So a hacker, on average, they're going to be sitting there trying hundreds or thousands of different attack vectors to try to gain access to just one thing. So statistically, like just numbers wise, they're failing most of the time, but that's kind of doesn't matter if they just get one win.
They only need like one win, right?
Right.
Yeah. So these hackers, I'm guessing they need a certain minimum amount of computer power or something to do all this stuff.
Well, that's really not the case
No.
actually. So you could pull off a cryptocurrency scam or even a fairly sophisticated technical attack with just a very small laptop with
I
minimal
don't know.
resources.
I'm thinking. I always thought it had to be all these computer screens, big and powerful computers, or just something simple.
Yep. If
Uh,
you've heard, I don't know if you ever heard of Kali Linux
mm,
before. So it's just an operating system where it's like Windows or Mac OS, but it's specifically designed for hacking. And so you could install Kali Linux on pretty much any laptop and use that to do malicious things.
and I'm guessing if you're like in a Starbucks on Wi-Fi, it's easier to hack then versus your own home network, right? Or does that
So
matter?
So it is, that is a very common, thing that you'll hear is public Wi-Fi is more dangerous, and that is the case in principle. But I will say that it has gotten a lot better than it used to be. So, for example, back in the old days, you connect to the Starbucks Wi-Fi, and all the computers that were connected to that Wi-Fi had some way of communicating with each other on that Wi-Fi. So if two guys sit next to each other, both have the laptops connected to Starbucks, there was some way that those two laptops could talk to each other. And so if one of them was a bad guy, they might be able to start doing shady things to the other guy's laptop. But nowadays, the Starbucks Wi-Fi doesn't allow that communication between the devices connected to it. So the risks are there. There still are risks, but they're different risks, and they're much lower.
So what's one thing everyone should do to improve their cybersecurity?
So this is the one thing. Like if there's no other thing that you would take away from anything else that I say, this is the one tip that I have for everybody. Enable multi-factor authentication on all of your accounts. Multi-factor authentication, meaning the kind where you log in with your username and password to Microsoft.com or whatever the website is, and then it also requires either the Authenticator app on your phone, if you've ever seen those, or even a text message that comes into your phone with a special code that you have to type in. Um, that is going to increase your security exponentially. And if you do that on all of your accounts, that's going to stop the majority of attacks that are going to happen against you. Now, the one caveat and the one thing that I'll say on that is if you can avoid the text message version of that, and use the Authenticator app, that's the best case scenario. And I'll actually show you. So I have something right here. This is what I use. I use beyond the Authenticator app. I don't know if this is, you can see this on the camera here. But beyond the Authenticator app, I use a hardware key for my multi-factor authentication. And this is really the best thing that you can use if you're able to use it.
Do password managers actually work?
So password managers are great, and we definitely recommend them, but you have to make sure to protect your password manager itself. So,
That would be kind of bad, right?
right, so we definitely recommend using password managers. It's much better than trying to remember tons of passwords.
Or use the same one for every single thing you have.
Right, or even small variations of the same one. Because what happens is, if you maybe make an account on 50 websites, one of those websites gets hacked, and all of the passwords from the users on that website get leaked somewhere in a data breach, then the bad guys are going to see that. They're going to see your email address with a password for that website, and they're going to start trying it on all of the different websites that are out there. They're going to try to log into your Facebook, etc. So password managers are great. They're super secure. There's a company that's pretty popular called LastPass out there. We don't really recommend them, but the reason I bring them up is because LastPass themselves have been hacked a few times. And none of their customers were really affected by it. And the reason why is because the technology works in such a way that even the password manager company themselves is storing your data in an encrypted fashion to where even if a hacker gets into their stuff and steals all the people's passwords, it's still so secure that you're still safe. So really, if there was a recommendation, we use Bitwarden.
Yeah, that's what I use. I use Bitwarden.
Yeah, Bitwarden is the
I
one
use
that we
them.
recommend.
That's good to hear they use it. So
Right.
I feel a whole lot better now.
Yeah, that's good.
So what's a myth about cybersecurity you wish would go away?
A myth about cybersecurity. I mean, I think it's really that one. More than like I kind of mentioned it before already, that it just it won't affect you. I really wish that people would start thinking. What we run into a lot of the time is people will call us and say, I can't believe what's just happened. We've all been locked out of our accounts. We don't know what to do. We don't know where to start. And at that point, or the point where you're calling a cybersecurity company in a panic, is too late. They've already done the damage that they could have done. And in almost all of those cases where we get those calls, it was such a minor thing that they could have done to prevent it from happening. Something as simple as multi-factor authentication would have stopped the whole event from happening. So just thinking from the perspective of, hey, it is possible for me to get hacked, and I should take some precautions.
So you're kind of like you have a new customer, right? Do you tell the company, I'm making this up, if you use us, you'll never get hacked? Or what's your, do you say, I guess you can't say they'll never be hacked. What kind of strategy do you give them as far as protect them as best as you can?
So we don't really, it's not really possible to say you'll never get hacked if you work with a certain company or if you do certain things. But the way that we would typically phrase it if we were to say something like that is that, we're working on lowering your risk or lowering your attack surface.
And then how do you prove that to someone?
So I think that you can demonstrate, with certain metrics and figures. So for example, a very simple one is, as an example, is if we were to look at an individual and say, oh, your Google account does not have multi-factor authentication enabled on it, and if you enable that, that will prevent 99.9% of attacks on that account. That's a way of quantifying it.
And if you're a customer, do you do some kind of monthly report for them that's saying what y'all did for them or anything like that?
It would depend upon the service. So, in some cases, if we're doing some sort of analysis work, we might have some sort of monthly report. But if we're doing, for example, a penetration test or compliance work, then, we would issue the final report and show, here's the things that we found that are vulnerable in your system. Here's the way that we were able to exploit them. And then here's the ways that you could solve those problems.
And then how does ethics work as far as doing offensive and defensive cybersecurity work? Does ethics play a role in there any kind of way?
Well, certainly if if we're hired to do offensive work for a company, we have strict as something called the rules of engagement. So we provide them with the rules of engagement. What that means is we strictly define the scope of what we're going to be testing. We determine what times are best for them. So if they have certain times where they don't want that activity to happen, so what targets are off limits, what targets are high priority, all these things. We make sure that, especially with offensive work, everything is very strictly defined before we engage.
Are there like some kind of national cybersecurity standards or ethics standards somewhere that some organization runs?
Um, no, I wouldn't say nothing comes to mind as far as ethics standards, but there are certainly compliance standards out there. So the risk management framework from the Department of Defense is a big one. NIST 853. There's certain documents out there that define sort of if you are an organization and you have technology that you're using, here are the checks that you should go through, sort of a giant checklist, if you imagine it, of all the possible things you should check to be as secure as possible.
So let's suppose someone has like some kind of certification, right? Is there anything that can happen where they lose that certification? Or once you have it for life?
Um, so there are, if most industry certifications, if you're talking about that side of it, are you talking about from from an individual that's qualified to do the work?
Yeah.
Or so yeah.
Or you got it from school, the Navy, or
Yeah, so most of those industry certifications expire after a period of maybe 3 years, 4 years, and then you have to renew them in order to stay current.
and I'm guessing you have to pay for that yourself. Like your company's not going to do that for you, right? That's an individual responsibility to keep up with that.
It depends heavily on the company. So Microsoft is more likely going to pay for that for you, and the military pays for those things for you. But at my company, we will pay for it for our, the people that work with us, and then but yeah, oftentimes you'll just pay for it for yourself.
So let's suppose someone graduates with a cybersecurity degree, they get the needed certifications, and they're doing the job 3 or 4 years. When should someone say, you know what needs to happen or whatever? Someone say, you know what, maybe this job isn't for me, right? What are some indicators that, being cybersecurity isn't for Jason or someone else, right?
Well, I mean, I would assume it's pretty much similar to almost any other job where either you don't enjoy it or you're bad at it. If it's one of those two things, then you could probably realize pretty quickly that you should, probably change fields. Especially in cybersecurity, I would just caveat that and say it is a sort of high risk environment to be in. So if you are bad at the job or you really don't like doing it, then it's sort of ethical for you to not do it anymore because other people's data is often at stake.